ELI5 If there are many satellites orbiting Earth, how do space launches not bump into any of them? Think of it this way. If there are many cars on the road, why do you not bump into them when you cross the road? You wait until there is a small time window to cross, and that is when you cross. Sometimes it's too windy and you wait for a longer distance between cars to cross, but if the weather is really good then you can cross when there is just a little distance between cars. Imagine you fell from space and landed in the ocean. Now imagine the odds of randomly landing on a boat. Tens of thousands of them sailing around, and yet the odds are infinitesimally low. The odds of hitting a satellite in orbit around Earth are orders of magnitude even less likely than that example because the volume of space around Earth is unfathomably vast. Imagine being in a field the size of 5 football fields, and you shoot a bullet across it. Then, someone on the right side of the field shot another bullet across. The odds of his bullet hitting your bullet are probably the same as a rocket hitting a satellite. On top of that, he knows where your bullet is and can shoot it to avoid your bullet. This is a fascinating question that many scientists and astrophysics are currently worried about. Yes, as other folks have pointed out, space is big. But there's a lot more to it than that. I'm no expert on the topic, but here's a link to a Cursed Jessage video which eloquently breaks down this exact question. Space launches sometimes have only minutes of a window to launch due to chances of hitting satellites. If a launch is going to happen between 2-3 p.m., it will be because weather is optimal and there is no obstruction of space to leave Earth. If either of these conditions, and many others, are not met, a launch window will not be opened. Take a few hundred cars and build a 100-mile tall parkade the size of Texas. Then tell everyone to drive in a straight line at a fixed speed. Put a GPS tracker in each car and when it looks like 2 cars will collide in the future tell one driver to slightly turn left by 0.1 degrees or to go to another level. That's the size of space. Think about how many ants are on planet Earth, 20 quadrillion. How are you not crushing hundreds of them with every step you take? Because they are tiny and the Earth is massive. The orbit around Earth is even bigger than Earth, has 3 dimensions to spread out in. And there are only 7,700 satellites. A lot of work goes into avoiding that, by tracking with radar and aligning orbits very carefully. It's tricky and careful work. There is a lot of space, but the desirable space is crowded. It has actually happened once, Iridium-33. 1. There's a lot of space out there. 2. All satellites are carefully tracked and the orbits of future satellites are planned accordingly. For now it's not an issue but it can possibly be an issue in the future. Time will tell. If we're smart about it, it will never be a problem. First of all, they are all carefully tracked. Secondly, you are underestimating the size of Earth and space. There are about 7,700 satellites orbiting Earth. All of Earth. For comparison, there are about 1.5 billion cars on Earth, and there's easily room for all of them. Come on, it's not like it's rocket science. The answer is that space is big. Really, really big. You may have a lot of satellites in orbit, but everything is tracked and launches are timed to avoid interfering with anything that may be passing by. Space is huge and there are a lot of different orbits at different altitudes you can place a satellite. You could spend your life living on a satellite and never see another satellite. Or if you did, it would just look like a distant star that moves. There are many ships at sea. How do you manage to launch more ships without bumping into them? And oceans cover only 70 of Earth's surface in its 2D surface. In orbit there is also separation in height, by hundreds to thousands of kilometers. The easiest comparison is that there is about 1 satellite per state in the US. Except they're in multiple orbits of different height, so really it's like 1 satellite per country in the world. Just to give a sense of scale, there is a theory that at some point in the future there will be so many satellites and space junk in our immediate orbit that it can potentially prevent us from populating the universe. Basically trapping us here on Earth. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. Douglas Adams. Space is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. Space is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. HGTTG, space is big. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly hugely mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that's just peanuts to space. Earth's surface is about 200 million square miles. Say you have 8,000 satellites in space. That means each satellite has approximately 25,000 square miles, each about the size of West Virginia. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the drugstore, but that's just peanuts to space. The top comment quoted 7,700 satellites. Imagine 7,700 cars driving around aimlessly around the Earth, oceans included, and on different are the odds they would collide. The Earth is big, satellites are small. Also, they track them very closely, as putting a launch or another satellite into a conflicting path could lead to Kessler's syndrome. By planning meticulously before committing into the launch, it's pretty easy to avoid stuff that moves in predictable route with well-known speed. Plus, the space is big. On a similar note, there may be millions of objects in the asteroid belt, but the odds of hitting something while flying through are negligible, no matter what C3PO says. Apart from orbit planning and collision avoidance, imagine 1,000 little RC boats cruising the Pacific. How do they not collide constantly? Because ocean big. Scale. Asking why space launches don't bump satellites is like asking, if there are millions of citizens in America, why is there room for tourists? Space is big, satellites are small. Collisions do happen, but mostly with space junk that is either out of control or purposely aimed at other items. It would be like driving down 10-lane highway with one car coming at you and 200 people giving you directions how not to crash into them. For the same reason that you don't hit a fish when you jump in the ocean. The ocean has a lot of fish, but it's really big. Additionally, the radius of where the satellites are versus the cars is greater, so there's even more surface area for satellites to exist.